Sims. Dustin Coates.
I like it when you guys are together and talking about voice.
Without further ado,
Welcome to the show.
I like that intro. It's quite...
Yeah, we were dancing over here.
Yeah. It's quite cool. I'll tell you the best part about it. I like it's Sean Konungo who says that last kind of final line. I like it when you guys are together and talking about boys. It's just quite a nice. Always makes me feel nice and warm and fuzzy inside. So thank you, Sean, for that for that piece of. But anyway, welcome to the show. Welcome, Chuong, and welcome, Carolyn. How you doing?
Doing well, yeah. How about you guys?
Yeah, all right. Dustin's in a very spacious looking room over there, Dustin.
Yeah. I got a little bit more space today.
Yeah, it's not, and
Stretching out.
Carolyn, yeah, why not? And Carolyn and Chuong are both in the same room, which I was just saying I haven't seen for probably I don't know when the last time I was in the room with another actual person that's not part of my immediate family. It feels crazy.
I know. I hope we're not sending any bad messages.
No. Bubbles are fine. The UK have just been extremely OTT in many areas.
Oh, yeah.
But by the time this time, gone.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it is a little jarring sometimes. I don't know when you watch movies if you're like older movies or TV shows. You go, "Where's the mask? Why are they all grouped together?"
Why are they hands?
Yeah, it's crazy. But welcome anyway. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Interested and looking forward to this discussion because it's always nice to speak to people who are working in what we would kind of call a center of excellence. You know, like a company who is taking voice technology and conversational AI seriously, and certainly seriously enough that they have their own team that are crafting their own processes, crafting their own standards, and doing their own research. You know, gathering their own learnings and building their own stuff. I'm always interested in delving into those methodologies and learnings and things like that. So thanks for taking the time to come and speak to us.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you for opportunity.
No worries. So we'll start out with some intros. Do you want to kind of give us a bit of a insight into who you are, what you do, and what your kind of roles are within Comcast? Chuong, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I can start. So my name is Chuong Nguyen. I'm a product designer for Voice Team for the last 3 years now. And so when I first started at Voice Team, I worked more on the voice design for the TV space. And then after that, I quickly broadened and expanded the scope of work more into multimodal design for the hardware, and also collaborate more with NLP and ASR scientists on the technology side. And prior to that, I'm a radar engineer, so I have a background in engineering. Prior to that, I was a radar engineer in France. So Dustin, that's why I asked you what you're in France. And then after that, I moved to the US and make my way to UX as a UX engineer for a software company. And yeah, so the work that I'm doing in Comcast right now is really help the team to advocate for voice and advocate for the multimodal designs and how to from the end to end, so from the big vision work and break into smaller chunk and how we can access and ship the feature out in the world. So that's what I'm doing. And obviously work between in the intersection between design, engineer, and product people, and bridge the gap and start the conversation between those three components.
Cool. Carolyn, what about yourself?
So hi, everyone. My name is Carolyn Reed. I am the lead voice researcher for Chuong and the rest of the voice team at Comcast. My training is in interactional sociolinguistics, and all that is a fancy way to say I study how we use language and features of language to get things done, whether those things are transactional tasks like exchanging information, or maybe more interpersonal tasks like building trust between two interlocutors. And again, whether those interlocutors are two people or a person and a system.
Cool, nice. And so, what? Go on, Dustin. I think there might be some delay on our line here, Dustin. Is there?
I think so. Should I leave and rejoin?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, should I leave and rejoin? See if it fixes it.
It's all right.
Since we're not live.
Oh yeah, go on then. Yeah, if we're not live, yeah. Let's try that. Let's try and see if that works. Yeah.
You guys sound great to us.
No, it doesn't seem to delay things on our side.
I think there might be a little bit of a delay on me and Dustin. There's a number of times when I've mentioned something, and then I'd get the vibe that Dustin hadn't kind of twigged. So I just want to make sure that we're in sync. How's that?
Okay.
Is that good?
What about now?
Can you hear me? I don't know. Can you hear me or not?
I can hear you. Is there a bit of a delay?
I'm not sure.
I think there's a bit of a delay. Yeah.
I think there is. I think there's a bit of a delay. All right. Well, I'll just pause.
We'll deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Anyway, apologies. Resuming, Dustin, you were saying.
Well, this delay is a great example of a lot of the things that we think about when we're thinking about conversational design and interactions. I mean, the pacing of an interaction is so important to all of the turn-taking dynamics and that sort of thing. Politeness is involved there too. So a great live example.
Exactly. It does affect the flow a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get this like stop-start feeling, of course, and the other thing that we think about, maybe not specifically in the context of the type of voice work that Chuong and I do, but certainly in other cases are, instances where that type of interruption feeling is a sign of like, I'm excited about what you're talking about. I'm enthusiastic. I'm showing you that I support and I care and I'm curious. That's the case for some people, but not the case for other people who kind of want a longer pause between turns to show that, yep, I'm listening, I'm letting you have the floor, and that sort of thing.
And the original question, maybe it's working now, is you mentioned earlier that you're helping the team advocate for voice. So what does that mean exactly when you're an advocate for voice?
So when I'm going to say advocate for voice, is really helping figure out what is the best, where the best use cases for voice, where voice could be the where we can help user to quickly get to their place where they want to be, find those micro places, and also figure out like telling them, hey, this is the perfect scenario for voice. Otherwise, it's not really the best use cases here. So that more about what I meant is what is the best way to do voice interactions in your TVs through the customer journey? Where is that?
And so one of the things that we think about is this idea of like accelerating the experience. We know that that's one of the biggest values that voice brings, certainly in our context. If you want to watch Below Deck, I want to watch that now. You don't hold me up. That's very important to our customers. So when we're advocating for voice internally, say with our product managers or the engineering team or other stakeholders, we want to make sure that, yes, we're accelerating the experience, but in the right ways. There are certainly places in our UI where we're not able to accelerate with voice. There's other means for accelerating. So we want to be careful about when and where we advocate for voice, because we want to make sure that we're suiting the customer's needs and kind of their mindset in that moment.
So we're not in the like a voice first scenarios. We're more on like multimodal designed, and think about the experience holistically, and figure out what is the best place for voice. So that's what I meant by advocate.
Got some good feedback for you on the voice side of Comcast so far. I won't mention his name, but I had a conversation with someone who, independently of this, he works one of the founders of a pretty decent voice AI platform, and didn't mention this conversation, didn't mention we were speaking to you. Just randomly out of the conversation came a praise for the voice interface on the Xfinity remote, with the statement that it works a hell of a lot better than any of the big tech companies could put together. And so I don't know what's behind the scenes, whether that is the technology, whether that's the design practice that's gone into that. But yeah, people are using it, it would seem, and it seems to be a pretty good example of voice working pretty well.
Well, that's great to hear.
That's exciting.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think, I mean, one of the benefits that we have compared to, teams that are working on Google Assistant or Alexa is that our domain is extremely focused. We're not trying to tackle all of the types of conversational voice challenges that those teams are. We're simply there to function in a very task-oriented way. So that, I think that helps us go deep in a lot of ways that maybe other teams are going wide.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm pausing in case in case there's delays mean I'm cutting off Dustin.
No. I mean, I guess one thing to ask is perhaps you talked about a constrained use case. What are the things that Comcast customer today could use voice that your team has touched on?
So there's so I think it's Comcast really sit in between the intersection of media and technology. So as a company, we provide content. So NBC News, and then we provide cable internet. So that is really a perfect intersection where we have the distribution channel, and then we have the media content that we can provide. So the three use cases where it's really top of my head is the three domains that we are really good at is the entertainment, the connected live, and then the customer service. So that is the three big domain that we are really good at. Of majority, I think it's 97% of all the voice command that we saw in or TV space is for entertainment. So that is like we got into like channel search or movie search, general search, or asking for what suggestion for content. For example, what should I watch, or free comedies movies or free kids movie, for example. That is their example for use cases for entertainment space. We do also have capacity to control as, for example, fast forward or research and rewind and pause. Beside that, so for their connected live, we have also the department or the business where we provide home connected, so camera or doorbells, and so we can say something like arm my systems, or another use cases related to internet as an internet provider company is pause Charlie internet, so something like that. So that's it, like three main use cases that is right now we do the best.
So you mentioned earlier on, Chuong, about how part of your role is to figure out where voice fits in that customer journey in the right kind of places. And so I'm glad to hear you say that, because there is a bit of a voice fever kind of going on where everyone's trying to slap a voice interface on top of everything. And so maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, who knows? I'm not necessarily that bothered. What's rising tide raises all ships, so to speak. But I'm curious about what your approach is to finding those use cases. And so one very simple way would just be to look at what it is that people do and then put a voice interface on top of that. So, for example, I don't know, with Spotify, for argument's sake, what do people do? Well, people find music. And so what do we do? Oh, well, let's put a voice interface that helps people find music. That kind of use case finds itself. Similar arguably speaking, it could be similar when it comes to finding something to watch. It seems like a logical thing that voice would be useful for, given how horrible remotes are to try and tap and swipe. And it's not even a swipe, it's just tap, tap, tapping away, which is, it still frustrates me to this day. If I search for something on like Netflix on my TV, I still have to use the button to scroll down and go right and press A, and so that seems like a perfect use case. But I'm assuming there's a little bit more that goes on with your process than just looking at what we do and putting voice interfaces on top of it. So I'm just curious as to how do you approach that kind of understanding the customer journey, figuring out where voice kind of makes sense within that. What is your approach to that?
Carolyn, do you want to talk about the research side of it?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we make a point of doing when we're thinking kind of about the future of these interfaces is we start with discovery research. A lot of that often involves observational research. That really helps us keep things tangible. Sometimes we'll do more kind of free-flowing, moderated interviews, qualitative type ethnographic interviews. Back in the day, we would go into customers' homes and kind of learn about their context. But that type of work is really what grounds the work that Chuong does. So even if he's moving into more of a design discovery process, which I think you would say is maybe your next step once we come out of a discovery research component, Chuong and the rest of the team has these, elements that are really around users' needs, their mindset in that space. So if we're thinking about entertainment, the mindset is I want to watch something, whether I want to actually be looking at the television or maybe I just want something on in the background. But I came to my television, I came to my remote for a specific reason. So we try to keep those types of things in mind as we're moving into the design process, and then from there, then we'll get into more kind of traditional usability testing type work. But taking the remote control as a very good example, Kane, you said the remote is this horrible thing with these buttons and so many presses. But from where we sit, and based on a lot of the observational work that we've done, having to do some of those repetitive button press type tasks with your voice is perhaps even more burdensome on the customer. So if we're looking to replace something that might involve multiple button presses, we don't want to make voice, a 1-for-1 there. We want to make sure that we're, again, like pushing that acceleration benefit that we see to be so valuable.
Yeah, so I think Carolyn covered well and how we approach things, and we are a really small team and well established and close knit team. We are like 5 designers, but each person owns a really specific specialties, and so we always start with discovery research and really seek out the problem versus jump directly to solve the problem right away, but trying to figure out what's the problem here and what's the user mindset here. The TV space have a really specific, mindset of people. People usually go to the living rooms and have like a relaxed pause, like relaxed position where they don't want to do too much work and they don't want to be there to learn something new. And that is really tied into how we educate our user, specifically for voice capacity and utility. But the other side of it is like, for example, navigation is a good example. We really observe people and on how they navigate through the interface. And at the beginning, we just like, hey, a perfect scenario, we just want to put voice on every single use cases. But then we start to notice and really look at holistic views like, hey, they are more on the browsing mindset. They want to actually take time to like go through the gallery of title and gallery of movies, and then it's not a perfect scenario for like voice navigation, for example. So that is like a example for really focus on user mindset and starting with discovery research. That Carolyn did a perfect job on that, and then also for the approach when we have the insight from the research, we kind of like group working with the design sprint for like all the big topics such as voice navigation or voice education, for example, breaking down with smaller chunk and actually tackle one by one topics. For example, if I take example of voice and education, for example, how could we do for voice suggestion on the TV? How could we address user when they first time install the systems, or more on like a later end where they become more a passionate user? So does that answer your questions, Ken and Justin?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's so you start out with exploratory research. I think you've come across a few interesting points there, which is that you're right. Sometimes you do just want to sit down, chill out, and do a little bit of, browsing if you're not quite sure what you want to watch. I think the voice side of things comes in really handy if you know what you want. Whereas if you're just kind of browsing, you're figuring out, maybe there's some exploratory researches that you could do around, show me some films with Tom Hanks or whatever. But you're right. But the thing that, one of the things I've been doing and having to do lately is my internet keeps dropping. And so I have to keep on resetting my internet password.
Oh, yeah.
Which means I've got to keep going to my settings. So open settings would be ideal. In fact, that might even work. I should try that. It might work on my thingy, or even just being able to reset my internet password, because all of that tapping and swiping is so frustrating. But I can imagine that it has a place when you're kind of just sitting there chilling. You want to browse. You've got no specific agenda. So I like that. And then the concept of, first of all, exploring the problem is a good one, because that's likely where you've got that piece of insight from, is that when people sit down, they don't always just want to get on with something. There's sometimes that part of the relaxation is just browsing through channels and stuff,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but I think one of the things, I can speak to my own kind of learning process at Comcast. I've been with the team about a year and a half now. And when I first joined, I was very voice first, voice everything. But I think something that I've certainly learned and that has become much more explicit to the team and I in maybe the last 6 months or so is that we call it the 10-foot space, where the distance between you and your TV is inherently, kind of implicitly and explicitly at various moments, multimodal. You've got the handheld remote that, yes, has these like vibro-tactile even components of the button presses that you can feel. There's the audible ear con that happens when you hit the voice button. And of course, there's everything that you can see on the screen, whether that's the content that you've requested, the ASR kind of transcription of what someone says is an important element there. And of course, the audio feedback from the TV. So there's a lot of different components there, and voice isn't going to solve all of a customer's requests, needs. It's not going to, fit into every single mindset. So I think that, that's certainly something that I've learned and kind of like come to internalize over the last year and a half, is that we want to work with these different modalities and not just be pushing voice, because that's not meeting our customers' needs.
And how often are you seeing where somebody might use touch, the remotes, the tactile that you talked about for one action and maybe voice for another action, but how often are you seeing a mixture of the two, maybe starting off with voice and then moving to the touch, or vice versa?
That's a good question. I don't know the stats on that, but it's very common. So we've been talking a lot about, this like direct retrieval type intent, where I have in mind either a specific show or movie that I want to watch, or I have in mind even just a genre that I'm interested in. I can deliver that command, get into the space, whether that's an entity page or, a browse type page, or even, say TV guide, and get into that browse space. Those are typically the types of things we see people lean on for voice because it accelerates the process. But once they get into those spaces, we see them typically switch over to the button presses because, as I mentioned before, it's even more burdensome to be saying down, 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 when you could be doing that, even more quickly with your button.
So just going back to Dustin's question, and again, like majority of the voice command that we receive again is title search and channel tuning and launching apps. So again, going back to the three mindset that we have, which we master very well is direct retrievals, something we call neighborhooding, and then something we call combing, right? Something like that.
Combing, yeah.
So it's like I know what the title I'm looking for. I know what TV shows. I know what channels I want to look for. That's where voice becomes like the best like use cases. And then more like neighborhooding is like, oh, I kind of like know. Oh, I want to do something like TV like free movies or free comedy shows, where we can do like genre search, something like that. It's kind of like a good scenarios too. But for, I don't know what I watch. That's where I want to do like go down, left, right, and use really the D-pad to explore channels, and that's where the guys start to come in.
I like that. Neighborhooding. That's quite a good phrase. So it sounds as though the user research that you do in the beginning, obviously in people's homes, seeing them in situ ideally, probably not so much lately as you mentioned, but so then you return back to the office, to the studio, you've got a list of problems, you've got a big bunch of insights. Chuong, you mentioned design sprints. You take that into a design sprint. What does that design sprint look like, and how does that unfold? Do you use the kind of Google quadruple diamond methodology? Have you got another framework that you use? Like, how does that sprint tend to unfold? What's the process?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So firstly, we don't use the design sprint for every single project. We only use when we have our timing challenging, or we have a really broad, big topics that we need to figure out. For example, again, like direction, like navigation or like education, something like that. So we don't apply. So we consider design sprint less than a recipe, but more under the mindset and psychology thing. So we pick the right exercise for us at that time. We always start. So Carolyn and I collaborate on do a lot of like workshop on design sprint inspired. So for specific use case, specific example, we Carolyn start to do disco research, and we have the research readout, and then we collaborate on how we can do the workshop, right? And so Carolyn start to do research readout first to prep the conversation. To put the team where we gather all of the designers, engineering, product people on the same place, where we prep the conversation and set the stage. And then after that, we pick couples design sprint exercises. The map exercise is one of the useful thing. And the how might we sticky notes, the voting on the sticky notes, and then brainstorming with the Crazy 8, something like as exercise. So from that, we quickly split into different small team and works independently, and that's actually after that we group together. So pretty much respecting the design sprint methodology, but really craft and pick the right exercise for us. So that is how we do. And Carolyn is our facilitator for design sprint. One thing I want to mention is like the facilitator needs to be exclusive from the design, because as a designer, you close your you hold your design really close to your heart, and kind of like easy to get defensive on something like that. So Carolyn is our neutral person.
Yeah, another thing we've learned, I think, about the design sprint too, is that you don't have to take that full week. I think that's outlined in design sprint. We often make it a little more modular, tackle one or two tasks or activities on day one, and then maybe 2 or 3 days later tackle the next when the team has the time. I don't think that's an unusual challenge for organizations, certainly big organizations, that calendars are tricky, and not everyone's going to be able to commit the 4 to 8 hours that we would love to have of them. So we try to accommodate that to ensure that our engineers can participate, our product people can participate, along with the designers and maybe any other researchers that we want to be voices in the room.
Interesting. So that's following typical frameworks so far, though. You've got your research up front, you define your problem, you take that into your briefing, which is presenting the situation, understanding or outlining the problems to be solved. You then go through that how might we exercise to explore the solutions, and then you've got the crazy eights that then comes up with various solutions, and then you presumably vote on which ones you want to take away. When you split up and go your separate ways to work on whatever it is, what exactly are you each doing there? Is it scripting? Is it prototyping? Like, what is everyone tasked to actually go away and do?
So one of the example is for the voice education project, where one person focus on the visual design of it, and the other person focus on the content strategy of it. So we are glad that we have our UX writer work with us too. So
and by voice education, just so everyone is on the same page, what we mean by that is the voice tips that appear at the top of your screen. So if somebody's on just executed a genre search, we might say, check out our free comedies, or some kind of suggestion to help them know what to say, like what voice commands are available / relevant in that context.
Sorry, I should be more clear on that. But so we split up, and one person should focus on the visual design of it, and the other person should focus on the content strategy, the words, and what are the content we should provide. And after that, we merge together and vote on the most relevant solution. So that is,
Okay, that sounds good.
One thing is also to mention is we not only, so the design is kind of messy, right? So we, if we look at how we can best educate user by using design sprint, it's also allow us to discover what is the quickest way to go out to market. Let me get an example of this. As at the beginning, I think it's 2 years ago or last year, we was trying to do something. How could we best educate user for first-time user? So either go through the guide, the instruction in the box, or we could do something on the screen saying, hey, you done with your installation, you might try this voice command. So that's another way. Another way is the marketing team, editorial team, right? So they send out emails with all the voice command that we can try it out on the phone. Reading the email. So those kind of that we consider as voice education in general. But we're starting to do design sprint with that. Like, how could we best educate user in general? And then later in the design sprint, we say kind of like, wait a minute, we actually have the voice command called what can I say? And this is the quickest way for us to get out there and validate or assumptions about the content and what things that the user are interested in, right? So the design sprint is not only allow us to figure out the solution quickly, but also allow us to start a conversation and actually prioritizing and see where is the opportunities for us to quickly go to the market. So that is kind of like example for design sprint.
And that's kind of like the final part around bringing those solutions together, voting on or getting the solution into such a shape, understanding the fastest kind of route to market. Typically in a design sprint, the next step would be kind of prototyping and testing and all that kind of stuff. Is that the case with you as well? Is it sometimes things are so clear cut that we kind of just try and get it in front of people, go to market, or what's your framework once you've decided what it is that you might want to do? Is it testing? Is it going to market? Like how does it kind of work?
Yeah, it depends. I think there are certainly cases where we'll put something live out to customers and do kind of a more traditional A/B testing on a larger scale. But a lot of the work that our team touches is more conceptual and kind of early development. So that's when we would want to do a prototype and go through kind of the more traditional iterative usability testing. Chuong is a whiz at Adobe XD, which has been our main tool for getting prototypes in front of customers early, quickly, and getting some of that testing type feedback.
Yeah, I have to give kudos to Adobe XD people, and maybe Adobe XD sponsor us somehow. but we use Adobe XD a lot when it's come to like usability testing and how could we either on site or we like Carolyn put people get or testing on the office. Like 1 year ago, 2 years now, or we can do online. And Adobe XD, they have a website and with their voice recognitions, and you can actually build different use cases and scenarios, and it worked with your voice seamlessly. So kudos to Adobe XD for that.
Say spring in there, it Dustin.
Yeah. And if you're hearing about Adobe XD, we incidentally have a podcast interview with the team from April 2018. So should definitely check that out.
Nice.
Yeah. So why do you decide on Adobe XD? Like there's other tools out there, VoiceFlow, BotMock, etc. What is it about Adobe XD that makes it the tool to go to for your prototyping?
I think it's again, specifically for 10-foot experience, we rely a lot on the UI itself. So Adobe XD allow us to have the animation going, have the voice recognitions going on. So all of the when I first check in like other prototyping tool that you mentioned it was not supporting the UI and animations, and Adobe XD support their animation and UI, and then right now they also support the icon, so you can actually include your own sounds in there, which is exciting. And so when we're prototyping, we need to make sure that it's most realistic as possible, right? So the Adobe XD allows us to do that.
And I think the other thing that's maybe different for us than for people who might use BotMock, for example, is that the voice component of these experiences is typically only 2 turns. You can say the customer's voice command and then our response to that command. So yes, technically it is conversational in that there's 2, interlocutors, there's 2 turns going on, but that's typically the extent of the voice interaction for us. Whereas, somebody who's working maybe on our Xfinity Assistant chatbot might be interested more in seeing a multi-turn, 3 or more turn type interaction.
Yeah, so it's more on the voice control entertainment versus, like assistance space.
Right.
Yeah.
And Carolyn, you mentioned earlier that when you first started, you were voice first everything, and you've come around a little bit to more of the multimodal. Were there other mistakes that the two of you made and learned from over the years that you could share with the audience?
We talked a lot about directional navigation already. I think for me, that was a major eye opener that, no, of course, nobody wants to say down, right, over, left, up. That was a big thing, a big learning. It sounds very simple, but the other part of that learning for me was kind of the complexity and multiple dimensions that our system supports. So yeah, when you're navigating directionally, sure, there's up and down, But in many cases, there's also the like in and out direction. I want to go into an entity page and kind of check out the details of, I'll use below deck as an example again. But maybe I decide I'm not into that right now, so I have to come back out. So there's a lot of different directions that a customer might move in the space that I think has helped inform my views on voice first versus a multimodal experience. I don't know what you think.
You sounds great. This is great. For the mistakes that we made, I think since voice, like right now, I think especially for Comcast, is voice, since it's kind of like connecting the shooters, tie things together. Whatever we do, we start to noticing, and we have to make sure that all of the partners and all of the designers and whoever we involve in the project have to align at least on the goal of the project and how we get there, because pretty much down the line, like things gonna be messy. Also on the when I first started, I was doing more. I was doing their voice design system, so really get alignments with the partners and work towards the consistency of the experience in terms of the UI, in terms of the content strategy. So because since we have like how much, 14 billion?
14 billion.
So
yeah.
14 billion voice command, and really a lot of use cases, and or a company is really big. So often the message get lost in the middle of the train. So make sure that we have alignment and consistency in terms of UI and content strategy. That's kind of like the things that we've learned in the past. And also, yeah, like when you work with NLP and the researcher for like linguistics, make sure that you talk the same language with them, because designers and a language like a researcher often mention two things different when it's come to like entity and intent. For example, like right now for us, when we mention, hey, entity, like if for us it's the entity page versus linguistics and NLP scientists mention something different regarding to entity. So that make sure that you talk in the same language and pay attention to those terminology and vocabulary. So that's thing that I've learned in class.
Some of the those that are setting up their own conversation design practice, one of the questions I often get asked, and one of the things that people often come to us seeking, is frameworks for kind of conversation design practices, some of which you've outlined there with the sprint methodology and stuff like that. But then what that leads to then is the same thing it leads to when you work with websites or you work with apps or visual design, is that over time you get a process that's defined, and that process leads to consistent outcomes. And so that process is then adopted and understood within the team. And within that process, often you then have certain principles and standards that emerge. So, for example, Comcast is highly likely to have brand guidelines when it comes to usage of the logo, style guides when it comes to designing and creating new web pages, and certainly when it comes to the UI, as you mentioned in there, Chuong, around like, there'll be standards that exist, principles that exist, colors that we have defined. Have you got to the point yet where you have principles and standards when it comes to your voice and conversation design process or output?
I think it's work in progress, but we have our product design, voice product principles, and something is really applied to the way we design things. For voice is one of the things one of my favorite thing is don't let them hang, bro. So it's kind of funny to say it, but it's really let the user know in like unhappy path or like something unexpected that we cannot fulfill the user intent, as why they have that result and where's that come from, and what is the other way that, the alternative way that they can actually use, and like, for example, give them a voice suggestion that it can actually as an alternative. So one of the voice principle that I like a lot, also keep it simple, is make sure that all of the result or whatever you do, make sure that simple and sweet and clear and really call to actions. That is the design, like voice product principle, but it's really applied to the way we work.
And all of that kind of comes back to that early discovery work. Like, keep it simple. The customer's there for very task-oriented, in a very task-oriented mindset. They're not there to build a relationship with us. They're there to watch TV. So keep it simple in that sense. And don't leave someone hanging. I think one of the other underlying research-oriented principles or observations that we've made is that people will lose trust in voice very easily if they're led off of a path, or if they're not 100% certain that they're going to be able to get to below deck easily and instantly. If there's any doubt in their mind, they're not going to use voice. So we want to make sure that we're supporting people. If they get off their path, we want to make sure that we let them know where they are, let them know how to get back to wherever it was that they either wanted to go, or that we kind of hypothesized that they were trying to go.
Yeah, and we also, whenever we designed, we work really closely with brand teams, so we make sure that we respect their brand principle too. And are we helpful here? Are we sounds like fresh? Are we sounds passionate? So that kind of like things that we rely on as their guideline for voice interaction.
Yeah, it's interesting your question too, because like I think of a lot of the principles that we're describing here are very behind the scenes. They're not necessarily like front end customer facing visual design or like sonic design principles. Certainly we have our branded ear cons, but I think the copy is really the place where our traditional design principles and kind of the persona of this nascent voice avatar really shines through. And again, as Chuong mentioned, that kind of falls back on our like corporate level content strategy guidelines.
I think a lot of the reason for defining standards really is internal in many cases anyway, to make sure that the process you follow always leads to a consistent kind of output. But there's obviously things that might impact the front end. But you mentioned persona there. Do you have a defined persona, a specific persona that you work to, or not?
Again, I think it's because the interactions that we have with customers are so brief. They're not there to build a relationship with us. You don't hear you don't hear our voice when you're watching TV. The sound that we want to prioritize is whatever TV show you're watching. So that personality that it's really Xfinity's personality, I think, that comes through in the content, in those voice education tips. That's really the only place where you see some kind of hint of a personality, but we don't have a kind of formalized persona for our voice avatar. But I don't know that we necessarily need one at least at this point where the product is.
Interesting. So it doesn't speak anything. It's all input, and then the UI is the thing that changes.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So for example, right now for specific use cases, Ken is you picked up the voice remote and say Netflix, for example, and you can have the avatar, the ASR going on and capture your work while say Netflix, and then after that avatar disappear and then launch your Netflix app. So that is about it. Otherwise, if you launch your Netflix or Prime videos by D-pad and really select on menus, there we have their avatar to scroll down and say, hey, for next time, you can actually just launch Netflix by saying Netflix. So it's more on the solo interactions that we have.
Right, and all that is text. There's no voice out sound.
Yeah. But since it's only text, we actually do like make sure that the text, again, is going back to the principle here. It needs to be clear, short, sweet, consistent, clear call to actions. So yeah, because it's really strengthened to the UI itself. You only have a certain amount of character limited. So
Interesting. I never thought about that actually. I don't think my TV speaks to me actually. Not that I speak to it much. But yeah, that's interesting. Any kind of tips or kind of last minute pieces of advice for people who are either one looking to kind of set up their own voice design practice or center of excellence, or anyone else who is working on anything similar where there is a definitive reliance on screens as well as voice? Any kind of advice that you would give them for getting started or for improving what they're doing?
I mean, I can speak to setting up your team. I'm a linguist, hire a linguist. We also have a behavioral psychologist on our team who has been invaluable. So if you can get your hands on someone with that skill set or resources that kind of put you in the frame of that realm of research, those two, especially in combination, I think have been incredibly valuable to us in that discovery definition phase.
yeah, and definitely have Carolyn in our team is a big plus for us, because always start with research and how we can build a research-backed process is really important. Also, really based on data too. Like you never know what kind of content that user is interested in, so make sure that you track those data and evaluate it. And then pay attention to the user mindset. Voice doesn't need to be everywhere, but really focus on the use cases.
And don't be afraid to not know the answer. I think is also, I always have to remind myself. I mean, we work on things that we've never touched before. When I first entered this field, I had zero technology background, and I think as a team, we've all gotten very comfortable trusting one another, being willing to just kind of bounce ideas off one another and not be afraid to, try something, give something a go. And if it's wrong, fine, we'll go find another route. But kind of balancing and recognizing that kind of uncertainty and nebulousness is part of this job, especially since we're such a small team. To an extent, we have specialties, but a lot of times the big problems that we work on are all hands on deck.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to say that voice, for 14 billion voice command, we have only 5 designers. But if I've heard that Alexa, when it first started, they only have 4 designers too. So we are the same scenarios there. But again, be nimble and be as a team and collaborate and apply those methods where you can actually quickly learn quickly and moving fast. So that's the thing that we like to suggest.
Nice. Well, I think if you've got the frameworks and the approach, it seems to be grounded in user research, finding a problem worth solving. You've got obviously the methodologies and frameworks around designing, solutionizing, prototyping, validating, all that kind of stuff. And so as long as you've got the frameworks, I think that even though it might be some problems might be harder than others, I think that you've obviously got the means of making it happen, which is obviously being proven out, which is fantastic. Dustin, any final thoughts?
No, other than to say this was great, and thanks so much for appearing on the podcast with us.
Likewise, thanks so much. It was great talking to you guys.
Nice one. Where can people find out a bit more about yourselves or about what you do? And second question, any resources that you would recommend for people to check out who are interested in learning more?
We're both on LinkedIn and Twitter. I think we can search for our names on both those networks. And then resources. I've been reading Cheryl Platz's new multimodal book. I think it's Design Beyond Devices. Again, we talked a little bit about multimodal. That's a newish space for everyone, but it's been a great book so far. And then we also talked about Jake Knapp's
Yeah,
design sprint that everyone's familiar with, I suspect.
And then there's a tons of podcasts out there. VUX World, again, kudos to you guys.
Yeah.
It's a good one. And voidbot.ai is a good one too. So yeah, there's a tons of good resources, Medium articles about doing conversations designs on mediums, and again, podcasts. Pretty good one.
Yeah, I'll also give Women in Voice a plug here. They're a great network. I think they're at almost all the conferences. It's a network that has grown fairly significantly in the last year or so. They've got a book club, a reading club that's ongoing. Definitely check that one out.
Cool. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. We'll put all of those links in the show notes, and I was going to say I look forward to experiencing it, but I don't know whether Xfinity does Xfinity exist in the UK?
So Sky is part of Comcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they have a different interface and a different hardware, but their underlying technology is our technology. So if you're watching on Sky, you're probably interacting with something that we've at least consulted on.
We work with them too on the daily basis.
Yeah.
Cool. Wicked. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate the time, and look forward to speaking again soon. And for everyone else who has tuned in, thank you again as always, and we'll see you on the next one.
Awesome. Bye everyone.
Bye.